I do not like being in a position where I am right about things that I do not want to be right about. But at the moment, it is truly looking like South Africa is at a breaking point. In my documentary Farmlands, I had plenty of people tell me they were terrified of the country descending into civil war, with combined factors of government corruption, racial tensions, and unchecked absurd levels of criminality. I truly wish the people who called me and my film reactionary conspiracy theory nonsense were correct. I wish they were laughing at me right now while everyone in South Africa was singing Kumbaya. But they are not. And in fact, you'll notice that progressive media aren't even touching this. They're not talking about South Africa at all right now, despite the fact that the footage is insane. And that's why, because the footage is so damn conclusive, they couldn't counter signal if they wanted to.
Okay, let's go.
The nation has descended into mass riots and looting with no police controlling the situation and literally just men on the streets with guns fighting mini battles for their shops and neighborhoods. It's like Mad Max out there. But quite frankly, I am not on the ground there right now. And I think having someone on the ground is essential to getting the full story and understanding it. So I've brought someone on to chat with me who is, and he is going to tell us just what the hell is going on in South Africa. Ian Cameron is the founder of firearms.co.za and ambassador for the organization Safe Citizen. Let's jump into the interview. Ian, it is so wonderful to have you here on my channel. Thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Lauren.
Could you please explain for non-South Africans just what is going on in South Africa right now? What has sparked this chaos?
Yeah, so I think it's important to. It's a very important question, just to give some context. First of all, everyone knows that the former president Jacob Zuma he admitted himself to prison last week, and it seemed to start as a little bit of an uprising by Zuma supporters, especially in the KwaZulu-Natal province, that obviously sparked quite a bit of violence. They started protesting, closing roads, etc. The challenge that we although then had, that a lot of people came in after that, a lot of people that have got nothing to do with Zuma or even the ANC for that matter, came in and they started with mass looting. In fact, some supermarkets, some shops, one of the pharmacy groups in South Africa has lost in the past 48 hours over 160 shops that have been looted in the country. Some supermarkets have lost, just in the KwaZulu-Natal province, over 50 retail outlets. One of the biggest supermarket groups in South Africa, just on Sunday evening, lost just over 40 stores. And I can go on. The point I'm trying to make is that it really hit breaking point. And I think the very sad thing for us is that the majority of people in the country are the ones that are silent, are the ones that are left defenseless, and are the ones that have to bear the brunt of not having jobs and becoming even poorer than what they already are.
Wow. So it's like just people jumping in on what started as a political thing and taking advantage of it to commit crime. That's tragic, but happens far too often, even in the States. So what does it look like on the ground, in the streets, in neighborhoods? People are seeing videos all over the place of, what looks like Mad Max, men just in the streets with guns. Can you describe what it is like out there at the moment?
Yeah, so let's take it from the different kinds of communities that you get in South Africa. If you go look at many of the poorer communities, a lot of people have taken to the streets to protect themselves and their properties. In fact, about 5 minutes ago, I saw a video that was sent to me from a township area, a very poor township in the Gauteng province, where a community have taken hands around a shopping mall, saying that looters will not destroy their mall because that is where they need to buy food. That is where many of them live and work. then in many other communities, people, innocent, law-abiding civilians, have gone as far as taking up arms because the police are outnumbered, under-resourced, not trained well enough, and obviously lack the leadership to really step up. And it's come to the point where criminals that were looting and that were putting people's lives in danger were shot and killed in the past day or so. So it really is a dire situation. If we look at just today, in the last probably 12 hours, the South African National Defence Force have been called in for help. They have sent out just under 3,000 troops on the ground that have moved into especially township areas to try and stabilize things. But I'm afraid it's too little, too late. Right as we speak, the city of Durban in the KwaZulu-Natal province is still facing mass looting action. In fact, I spoke to one of the major retail outlet risk managers earlier today, and they've lost more than 100 million rand in just a few hours, where many of these major supermarket retail outlets have lost their distribution centers. Never mind, or not even mentioning the shops, the actual distribution centers have been cleared out. The South African National Brewery has been looted as well, where it's just, you literally see thousands of people running into a warehouse and just helping themselves. Dunlop, the tire producer, their warehouses were looted, and the list just goes on. But it's a state of absolute chaos. If it wasn't for private security and well-organized communities in this country, I'm sure the violence and the destruction would have been 100 times worse.
Yeah, and I've heard that private security in South Africa is one of the biggest industries in the world, in South Africa, for private security. I really want to reiterate to my audience, a lot will know this already, but some may not. People will look at these videos and be like, why are you out there with guns against people just robbing shops? You have to understand, this isn't like the first world. It's not like Canada or America where it'll just get rebuilt the next day. This is very poor areas where people are relying on this as their only source of food and work and everything. Like, their community will collapse if they lose this infrastructure. And these stores are not going to rebuild in places where they had everything stolen and destroyed there. And speaking of these people out there with guns, I really wanted to ask you about this. Is the average South African armed? How many people are armed and able to defend themselves in that way and their communities in that way?
Well, I think this is the sad thing, that less than 2 million people in South Africa are legal firearm owners. And obviously, we've probably got more than 60 million people in the country, a lot of which, or a lot more, that are illegal immigrants as well, probably pushing us far over that number. But it obviously makes it very difficult, because you've got a small amount of law-abiding armed citizens that are able to step up and say, but we will defend what is ours, and obviously our lives and our families as well. The interesting thing is that there's a perception, obviously often created by the anti-gun lobby, that it's only a certain cultural group or race group that owns guns. And the interesting thing is, in South Africa, it really is a broad spectrum of different cultural groups, different racial groups that bear arms. And obviously, from my side, I encourage everyone, if you are able to legally arm yourself and understand how you as a law-abiding citizen can defend yourself, your family, and your property, you should do so. I think what people in the first world need to understand is that just today, there were tenfold cases where so-called protesters actually fired live ammunition towards community members that were defending their shops or their houses, or trying to keep their streets clear, to the point where community members actually constructed vehicle checkpoints before a certain highway on-ramps or freeway on-ramps and off-ramps, to try and check that looters can't go in and out with vehicles that are either going to be used to load products onto, or used to escape with stolen goods. Some communities have even gone so far as to placing rolls of barbed wire on roads to create roadblocks to stop looters from coming in. And this is the interesting thing. The perception is that this is fueled by hunger, that it's fueled purely by poverty. That's a load of absolute nonsense. I think obviously poverty plays a role in the way that people are desperate, but the main cause of this is a country with absolute lawlessness, absolute corrupt leadership, absolute political cancer that is created by the ANC in this country. And on top of that, the amount of money that has been looted from state coffers by specifically the ruling party, that obviously makes the poor even poorer, causes for people to say, but if my leaders can't behave themselves, why should I do so? If they don't respect the rule of law, why should we do it? And then it becomes a perfect storm where people are utterly desperate. Their moral fiber is very, very low, of a very low standard. And therefore, this chain reaction starts. And to the point where we are now, where thousands and thousands of people have had their livelihoods destroyed over a space of less than 72 hours.
Now, where do you think this is going? I mean, obviously, there's the short term of just the next few weeks, what's going to happen, and then the long term as well. What is going to be the longer term fallout of this? I know that the government are considering banning guns. I know that they're just giving less ability for the public to defend themselves from this mass crime, but also not upping their own ability to police and keep things under control. So where do you see this going in the short term, and where do you see this going in the long term?
Yeah, well, I think the disarming side, let's talk about the long term first. The disarming side is a battle that's going to carry on for the rest of time in South Africa. As long as the ANC plays any form of governing role in South Africa, we are going to be fighting this whole thing of disarming law-abiding citizens. Just to give you an idea, I actually wrote an article recently. The South African Police Service, just between the years 2005 and 2017, lost just over 26,000 firearms. That means 26,000 firearms are on the streets, probably, and well, obviously, most likely in the hands of criminals. Just after that, probably between about 2013 and 2019, they lost just under 10 million rounds of ammunition, which tells you that criminals are armed to the teeth. Just before that, the ex-cop Chris Prinsloo admitted in court that he helped smuggle just over 9,000 firearms to gangs in the city of Cape Town. So the streets have been flooded by guns that belong to government. If you go look at cash in transit heists, which are very violent, very well organized heists that very often happen in South Africa almost daily, where armed money trucks are bombed and then the money stolen. We very often see that if at all any guns are seized, the firearms that are seized are assault rifles that are all state issued, R1s, R4s, R5s, and so on. So I think it's important to give that as context. The police in South Africa recover less than 7% of firearms that are stolen or lost from them or by them. And this tells you that in actual fact, the South African Police Service, and most likely the South African government, is the biggest provider of illegal firearms to criminals in South Africa. And whether it's because of negligence or a lack of political will to sort problems out, regardless, they are endangering millions of people through their absolute reckless and careless attitude. In terms of the short term, South Africans need to make sure that they organize themselves in their communities. There's ample space within legislation to do that. They need to be able to operate together to safeguard their livelihoods, because the South African government has failed to do so and won't be fixing it anytime soon. The only place in South Africa where there's quite a bright future in terms of provincial government and local government is in the Western Cape province. And the reason for that is it is not governed by the ANC.
It's just, I'm so sorry that you guys are in that situation right now. I mean, losing all of your shops, livelihoods, communities being burnt to the ground right now, and then being fearful that you won't even be able to defend yourselves at some point. That is, I mean, I've always known the future in South Africa has been uncertain, but this is insane. I've been getting messages constantly from people who are just traumatized by what is going on. I did want to finish with just one last question here. This has been a phenomenal interview. I think a lot of people that follow my channel will want to know if there are any updates on a lot of the stuff I covered in my documentary Farmlands, the farm murders, the seizure of land. What's the situation with that right now?
I think it's been overshadowed by a lot of other political issues. COVID-19, the lockdown, double standards by government. We saw that the government last year, when the first lockdown for COVID-19 was announced, deployed over 70,000 troops to the streets of South Africa. And today we see violence all over the country, and they only deployed 2,500 troops for a far more serious situation, in my opinion, in any case. So obviously, there's still discussion by it. I see that the EFF, which has actually become a bit of a sideshow political party in South Africa, are trying to make themselves relevant at the moment on social media, saying that land was looted many years ago, and that specific racial groups have stolen land and all of that nonsense. But it doesn't seem that they are getting any traction. I must say that government's actions in the last probably 18 months have caused for far more people from all creeds and cultures in South Africa to say, but wait a minute, this government is utterly corrupt. All of us are being negatively impacted by it, and we need to unite in some way to stop this. We need to organize ourselves. We need to have some form of resistance. What is very interesting is that in terms of farm attacks, from my experience in any case, and this is my personal opinion, there's a drastic increase, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, of farm workers also being attacked at a higher rate than what they were before. It also seems that attacks have stabilized, which is a terrible thing that we're talking about, stabilizing attacks, because it shouldn't even exist, but that they have stabilized because of communities organizing themselves in a way that they can defend themselves, their families, neighbors, and so forth. So to answer you, Lauren, very shortly, I think the South African Police Service and the South African government has failed already. It is a failed state, and we have started to see the result of that. I think we've got tough times ahead. I know hospitals are overcrowded, and even more so after the last few days because of gunshot wounds and other things. And that with COVID-19 has become a storm in a teacup that is really going to cause serious challenges for us in the future.
Oh, I never like to hear that one problem has been overshadowed by even bigger problems, but at least the one positive there is that there is nothing that unites people like a terrible government. And we are all praying for you, my audience, guys. I am just begging you, please pray for these guys in South Africa, for their homes, their communities, their lives at the moment. And Ian, where can people find you and get updates on what's going on?
Yeah, so I would like to encourage people that they can, first of all, in terms of the whole gun right fight in South Africa, they can read more about it on firearms.co.za, or they can visit the Safe Citizen website, which is just safecitizen.co.za. And I think there they will get an overview of what the current situation and how it's affecting people. And then if they want updates on what is happening in South Africa at the moment, they can follow me on Twitter at Ian Cameron 23. If they do that, they'll be able to see the videos, photos, everything as it happens. And we're quite a group of people that's using that platform to make sure that the world out there is informed about what's happening in South Africa. And especially at the moment, I think Twitter is probably the most relevant platform to really get quick news out there.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much for joining me, Ian, and everyone else. Thank you for tuning in. And yeah, I guess we'll just be monitoring the chaos and praying from afar. I'll chat again soon, guys. Bye.